Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. A new round of nuclear talks between Iran and the U.S. concludes in Geneva. What's the outcome of the high-stakes negotiations? And an update on the Trilateral peace talks between Ukraine, Russia, and the U.S. Reverend Jesse Jackson, civil rights icon and two-time presidential candidate, has passed away at the age of 84. What we know about his legacy. Warner Brothers Discovery rejects Paramount's $30 a share bid, but it's giving the studio 7 days to improve its offer. Officials say no family members are suspected in Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. And President Trump weighing in on the investigation. We've got the update there.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
And the second round of indirect nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran wraps up today in Geneva, Switzerland. Following the meeting, Iran's foreign minister says Tehran and Washington have reached an understanding on key principles. He says there have been positive developments compared to the previous round, adding that both sides will now work on draft documents and exchange them. But he cautions that progress does not mean an agreement will be reached soon, saying no specific date is set for a third round of talks with the U.S. And the second round of talks was mediated by Oman. President Trump saying last night he'll be involved indirectly, adding he believes Iran wants to make a deal. Washington sought to expand the scope of talks to non-nuclear issues such as Iran's missile stockpile. But Tehran said it will only discuss curbs on its nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. Meanwhile, as the talks began today, Iran said it will close the Strait of Hormuz for several hours as it holds live-fire military exercises. The strait is a crucial international waterway through which 20% of the world's oil passes. This is the first time the regime has closed parts of the strait since the U.S. began ramping up military action in the region. And joining us to discuss the latest on Iran and the outcome and hopes of the Geneva talks is Jacob Alador, director at the America First Policy Institute's Center for American Security. Great to have you with us today, Jacob. Let's start with President Trump there saying Iran wants to make a deal. How convinced are you of that?
It's great to be with you. Certainly, Iran wants to also determine the terms of the deal as well and prolong these talks. And obviously thinks that it can saber rattle to get things on its terms. But the fact is, the administration is exactly right here. Look, Iran is a global issue with U.S. equities around the world. And as you alluded to as well, it's not just the nuclear file, but it's also the ballistic missile program. It's Iran's support for terrorism around the world. These are all issues that we need Iran's commitments on. And of course, the United States is ready with its military assets in the region. So we'll see how this progresses. But certainly, Iran has its own incentives to carry the talks in the way that it wants to.
So what would a win look like for the U.S. here in these talks?
Well, I go back to Secretary of State Marco Rubio's description of the scope of the talks. It was basically the holistic terrorism, a range of issues, but certainly those at a minimum. I think Iran is pivotal as well, obviously, to the threats in our hemisphere vis-a-vis Venezuela and other adversarial regimes in Latin America. It's also pivotal to Putin's war effort in Ukraine, where Iran is providing ballistic missiles and drones and is interested, of course, in that sustaining. And so I think there's a lot of potential, in fact, in getting Iran's compliance on these range of issues. What that will mean in terms of its survival and next steps there will be interesting to watch.
Yes.
But I think certainly a comprehensive agreement in those ways has been missing to date.
And part of this puzzle is Iran wants the U.S. to ease international sanctions on it. What leverage, if any, does the regime have right now to effect such a thing?
Well, the fact is not very much. And of course, we've seen the Obama playbook of lifting sanctions and those types of appeasement strategies. Those I don't think are what the administration is looking at, to my mind. But I think that, look, Iran also has now Russia, it has China buying its oil. And in fact, there are other breakthroughs we're looking at in the region, looking at our partners trying to push them off of Iranian and Russian oil, I think those will add the pressure to the Iranian regimes and make them come to the table to agree to a deal on the U.S.'s terms, which I think is part of the objective here.
Yes, President Trump trying to make separate deals with India. You mentioned Russia there. And of course, China is Iran's biggest oil buyer. So if China is cut off from Iran's oil effectively, how could that potentially impact the Iranian regime?
Well, I think that's a significant economic lifeline that the regime would lose. I think there's another piece as well. There's a Russia-Iran economic arrangement agreed to last year that would have Russia providing gas to Iran as a way of offsetting the losses Russia suffered due to the Nord Stream 1 pipeline explosion a few years ago. I think that would be another piece of this too. And so all of this is interconnected. And so it's not only cutting off the economic lifelines to Iran, but also ensuring that as the pressure is placed on Iran, that our other adversaries feel that pressure as well.
Now, just looking a little deeper into the regime itself, Secretary of State Marco Rubio recently said it's hard to negotiate with Iran because the regime makes its decisions based on religion rather than geopolitics. If that's true, what kind of principles or narratives might be informing the cleric's moves?
Well, I think that's exactly right. It's not only religion; it's ideologically motivated. But obviously, this administration is not afraid of embracing and pursuing even the hardest of deals. If those deals, of course, don't work, there are other options and levers we have at our disposal. But the reality is that Iran has been waging the longest forever war on the American people in half a century, and so the stakes and the importance of the American people could not be in some kind of an outcome being reached, whether diplomatically or militarily. The regime, for its part, has an interest in what it calls exporting the revolution. So on the one hand, it's survival at the top of the government's governance. But in another sense, and perhaps even more urgent, is ensuring that its terror network, all the way from Latin America to parts of Eastern Europe and beyond, survives whatever this occasion presents. And so I think Iran is obviously using diplomacy for its part, as it has done in the past, to try and extend its own lifeline and extend and build up its own leverage, however it sees fit. But obviously, I think the administration has seen this before. It's seen this last summer as well. And so I think it's navigating carefully, too.
And the regime itself is at an interesting inflection point. The President Trump has said recently a change in the regime could be the best outcome for the Iranian people. And indeed, it looks more and more likely. The nation beset with unrest, corruption, a faltering economy. How close is that hypothetical future in your view?
It's the closest it's ever been. Whether and how that'll manifest, time will tell. But the reality is that this regime and its proxy networks have suffered under the military pressure that Israel and the United States have placed under it, especially last summer, Operation Midnight Hammer. And that includes, during that 12-day war, Iran has lost members of its military leadership and research scientific community that supports its nuclear program. And so Iran is facing desperate measures. It's even called on its militias in this recent round to support it, which I think is another sign of desperation.
And what will you be watching for next as key indicators of progress in these talks?
Well, I want to see exactly what happens now in Iran. I want to watch as well the regime's activities towards the demonstrators. That remains a threshold the president has set. And I'll want to watch as well how the continuing rounds of talks go, what outcomes they produce, and obviously what that looks like.
Certainly. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights and perspectives. Jacob Aladort, good to speak with you.
Thank you for having me.
Trilateral peace talks between Ukraine, Russia, and the United States is now underway in Geneva. The head of the Ukrainian delegation announced the start of the talks earlier today. Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council released still photographs of the U.S., Russian, and Ukrainian delegations. Negotiators are meeting for 2 days of U.S.-mediated discussions. The talks are expected to focus on the key issue of land. President Trump urging both sides to move quickly toward a deal. He's pressing Moscow and Kyiv to end the war, Europe's largest since 1945. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said Kyiv is facing the greatest pressure to make concessions. Ahead of the talks, Russia launched heavy overnight strikes across Ukraine. Zelensky saying tens of thousands of people were left without heat and water. And President Trump weighing in on the talks in Geneva and other issues aboard Air Force One yesterday. Here's more.
Representatives from Ukraine and Russia are meeting in Geneva today and tomorrow to discuss peace. Russia says the main sticking point will likely be territory.
It's going to be very easy. I mean, look, so far, Ukraine better come to the table fast. That's all I'm telling you.
Russia is demanding that Ukraine cede the remaining 20% of the eastern region of Donetsk that Moscow has failed to capture, something Kyiv refuses to do. On Iran, Trump commented on the second round of nuclear talks this week, saying he will be involved indirectly.
I would say they're bad negotiators because we could have had a deal instead of sending the B-2s in to knock out their nuclear potential, and we had to send the B-2s. I hope they're going to be more reasonable. They want to make a deal.
Trump warned that failure to reach an agreement with the U.S. would be very traumatic for the Iranian regime. Washington deployed a second aircraft carrier strike group to the Middle East last week. Turning to Cuba, the president addressed the ongoing oil embargo.
Cuba is right now a failed nation. They don't even have jet fuel to get for airplanes to take off. They're clogging up their runway.
He said Secretary of State Marco Rubio is engaged in talks with the island nation.
They should absolutely make a deal because it's really a humanitarian threat. And we have a lot of great Cuban Americans, and they're going to be very happy when they're going to be able to go back and say hello to their relatives.
Over to the Middle East, President Trump says Gaza will soon be opening up.
Now, you have some flames here and there, but we essentially have peace in the Middle East.
His remarks follow news that members of his newly created Board of Peace pledged $5 billion toward rebuilding war-torn Gaza.
I think it's going to go far beyond Gaza. I think it'll be peace all over the world.
Trump says the Board of Peace is working in conjunction with the United Nations.
The United Nations has great potential. They haven't lived up to the potential, but I think they might aid us a little bit. But we have the greatest leaders in the world joining the Board of Peace.
Trump also criticized Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's comments in Munich regarding U.S. troops defending Taiwan.
I think that this is such a, I think that this is of course a very long-standing policy.
I watched AOC answering questions in Munich. This was not a good look for the United States.
The president leveled similar criticism at California Governor Gavin Newsom for his Munich comments. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Thank you, Daniel. And more on the war in Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky celebrating major achievement. He says Ukraine has been able to bring back 2,000 children from under Russia's control. Zelensky says this is thanks to his Bring Kids Back initiative. He thanks civil society organizations and international partners for making the safe return of these children possible. A video posted by Zelensky says Russia abducted many Ukrainian children during the war. Some of the children went through interrogation, torture, and propaganda brainwashing under Russian control, he said. The Ukrainian president writes, quote, thousands of Ukrainian children are still held captive by Russia, becoming victims of its crimes every day. But he said, we will not stop until every Ukrainian child is back home. And back in the U.S., Reverend Jesse Jackson, civil rights leader and two-time presidential candidate, has died at the age of 84. In a statement, his family said he died peacefully this morning, surrounded by his family. They described Jackson as a tireless change agent who elevated the voices of the voiceless over decades of engagement in civil rights advocacy, voter mobilization, and presidential politics. The cause of death not immediately given. Jackson rose to prominence in the civil rights movement, working alongside Martin Luther King Jr. in marches, sit-ins, and organizing efforts. In 2017, he disclosed that he'd been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. The Jackson family said, "Our father was a servant leader not only to our family, but to the oppressed, the voiceless, and the overlooked around the world." Public observances will be held in Chicago, with further details to be released by the Rainbow Push Coalition. And President Trump is reacting to Jesse Jackson's death, saying he knew Jackson well. In a post on Truth Social, the president writes, quote, "He was a good man with lots of personality, grit, and street smarts. He was very gregarious, someone who truly loved people." Trump says he helped pass measures that Jackson supported, including criminal justice reform, long-term funding for historically black colleges and universities, and the Opportunity Zone's economic development package. Trump adds, quote, "He loved his family greatly, and to them I send my deepest sympathies and condolences. Jesse will be missed." In other news, Warner Brothers Discovery has rejected a renewed $30 a share hostile takeover bid from Paramount Skydance. But it's giving the rival studio 7 days to submit a higher best and final offer. Paramount has informally floated $31 a share and could go higher. However, Warner Brothers board says it remains committed to its planned merger with Netflix. The streaming giant is offering nearly $28 per share for its studio and streaming assets. Shareholders are set to vote on that deal March 20th. Under the merger terms, Netflix has the right to match any superior proposal. Paramount's bid values the full company at about $108 billion, significantly above Netflix's offer for select assets. Authorities in Rhode Island are investigating a deadly shooting at a high school hockey game in Pawtucket. Police say 56-year-old Robert Dorgan, a father who identified as transgender, shot 4 family members and a family friend before taking his own life. The victims included the mother of Dorgan's son, a student competing in the tournament, and a sibling. 3 others remain in critical condition. Witnesses say a bystander tried to subdue the gunman. Officials described Dorgan as having a history of family court disputes and mental health issues. Police responded within minutes of the first 911 call. Pawtucket Mayor Donald Greben said the city is mourning and vowed to keep the public informed as the investigation continues. And our hearts do go out to that family and their grieving. And the latest on the Nancy Guthrie case, the Pima County Sheriff urging the public to stop speculating that Guthrie's family members could be suspects. In a statement yesterday, the sheriff says, quote, "The Guthrie family, to include all siblings and spouses, has been cleared as possible suspects in this case. The family has been nothing but cooperative and gracious and are victims in this case." The sheriff says it's wrong and cruel to suggest that the Guthrie family could have been behind the kidnapping. Meanwhile, President Trump is threatening the kidnappers with the death penalty if Guthrie is not returned alive. In an interview with the New York Post today, the president says the kidnappers will face the most severe federal penalties if Guthrie is found dead. Authorities say preliminary tests on the glove found about 2 miles from Guthrie's home revealed DNA from an unknown male. Investigators say the gloves appear to match those worn by a person seen in surveillance video outside Nancy Guthrie's home. The FBI is still awaiting official confirmation of the results. Once confirmed, the unknown DNA profile will be entered into a national database in an effort to identify the individual. And investigators now working with Walmart management after identifying a backpack worn by the suspect as an exclusive store item. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos told the Associated Press yesterday the 25-liter Ozark Trail Hiker backpack was the only item of clothing that had been definitively identified. Coming up, the second round of indirect nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran wraps up today in Geneva, Switzerland. Our expert panel unpacks it all and what's next. And President Trump is stepping in as a massive sewage spill continues pouring into the Potomac River. He says federal authorities will take over after local officials struggled to manage the crisis. Welcome back. A look now at voter ID. Senate Majority Leader John Thune set to challenge Democrats on new voter legislation. The Save America Act has the support of 50 Senate Republicans, including Thune, giving it the votes needed to overcome a major procedural hurdle. President Trump, meanwhile, discussing voter ID aboard Air Force One yesterday. Check it out.
And the Democrats don't want to give proof of citizenship. They don't want to give voter ID. Think of it. Who would want proof of citizenship?
It's an outrageous proposal.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer labeling voter ID legislation Jim Crow 2.0 and pledging to fight vigorously to block it. He says many poor people do not have proper ID to fulfill the requirements. Meanwhile, House Majority Whip Tom Emmer calling Democrats hypocritical for opposing the Save America Act, which requires federally accepted photo ID at the polls. Emmer noted that Democrats themselves demand ID for events such as last year's DNC convention. Early voting has begun across Texas, kicking off a high-stakes primary season for Senate and other key races. Primary election day is set for March 3rd, with some races potentially headed for runoffs in May. Incumbent Senator John Cornyn faces a tough Republican primary against Attorney General Ken Paxton and Congressman Wesley Hunt. On the Democratic side, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and State Representative James Tallarico are battling for nomination. Candidates are campaigning across the state with rallies and events timed to coincide with early voting. Several House contests are also drawing attention after redistricting shifted several districts toward Republicans, including the 28th district, represented by Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar. And White House border czar Tom Homan says that over 1,000 immigration agents have left Minnesota, with more leaving early this week. Homan also responding to some of the demands that Democrats have made to end the shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security. NTD correspondent Jason Blair reports.
Border czar Tom Homan says that over 1,000 ICE and federal agents have left Minnesota following a drawdown announcement last week.
As of Monday or Tuesday, we'll remove several hundred more.
Homan says that a small security force will stay behind while the team makes sure that agreements with local and state law enforcement remain in place.
Our security forces that will respond to when our agents are out and they get surrounded by agitators and things got out of control.
Homan says that during conversations with Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, they didn't agree on everything, but he's happy with the results of the dialogue.
Me and Mayor Frey will never agree on much, but you know what? His officers did respond to take down illegal roadblocks that made it unsafe for not only citizens of Minnesota, but our officers.
The Department of Homeland Security has been shut down since Saturday after Congress failed to reach an agreement on funding. Some of the core demands from Democrats include restricting agents from wearing masks, ending alleged racial profiling, enacting stricter requirements for judicial warrants, and requiring agents to show ID and wear body cameras. Homan responded to some of the demands. He says that racial profiling isn't occurring.
ICE will briefly detain and question somebody based on reasonable suspicion. It has nothing to do with racial profiling.
He says that agents already wear identification placards and also comments on the masks.
As far as the mask, look, I don't like the masks either, but because threats against ICE officers, are up over 1,500%. Actual assaults and threats are up over 8,000%. These men and women have to protect themselves.
And now in Texas, if someone wants to register a vehicle with the DMV, they must first submit proof of legal status. The Texas DMV voted unanimously to approve the new rule. Some critics say the change will put more unregistered cars on the road and make it harder for police to locate some people of interest if there's a witness to a crime. The push for this rule was started last fall by Texas State Rep Brian Harrison. Reacting to the decision by the DMV, Harrison said, "Proud to have forced the DMV to stop allowing illegal aliens to register vehicles in Texas. Insane that this was happening for so many years." The decision was made on Thursday, and some counties have already started implementing the new requirement. Jason Blair, NTD News.
Thank you, Jason. And President Trump now getting involved with a massive sewage spill near the nation's capital. The president directing federal resources and blaming Maryland's governor for mismanaging the situation. Here's more.
President Donald Trump now stepping in as a massive sewage spill continues flowing into the Potomac River. The president blaming Maryland Governor Wes Moore for what he calls gross mismanagement. Trump called the sewage spill a massive ecological disaster, saying local authorities cannot handle the situation. Trump said yesterday the federal government will step in to protect the river. In a social media post yesterday, the president said he was directing federal authorities to immediately provide all necessary management, direction, and coordination. The crisis began January 19th when a major sewer line collapsed in Montgomery County, Maryland. The rupture sent more than 240 million gallons of wastewater into the river. A local water utility saying nearly 250 million gallons overflowed from the waste pipe since early February. University of Maryland researchers are calling it one of the largest sewage spills in U.S. history. Researchers have detected high levels of bacteria in the water. Health experts warning of serious risks for anyone coming into contact with the impacted water. Officials emphasize drinking water has not been impacted. Governor Moore's office is pushing back against Trump's comments, saying it is the federal government, not Maryland, that is responsible for the sewer line. Meanwhile, emergency repairs are expected to take several more weeks. Permanent repairs could take up to 9 months.
And a federal judge is ordering the National Park Service to reinstall slavery history panels at the president's house site in Philadelphia. The ruling temporarily blocking changes made under a Trump directive on how U.S. history is presented at federal sites. Judge Cynthia Roof yesterday granting the city of Philadelphia's request for a preliminary injunction. The order prohibits further changes to the exhibit without an agreement between the city and federal government. The exhibit described the lives of 9 African-American slaves owned by George Washington, as well as the history of slavery in Philadelphia. The National Park Service took down the exhibit's panels and video elements last month. The executive order from President Trump they cited said, over the past decade, Americans have witnessed an effort to rewrite the nation's history, replacing objective facts with a distorted narrative driven by ideology. The White House has not yet responded to a request for comment on the judge's injunction. And Thomas Pritzker, the longtime executive chairman of Hyatt Hotels Corporation, is resigning. In a letter published yesterday, he acknowledges, quote, terrible judgment in maintaining contact with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Here's more.
Thomas Pritzker is stepping down as executive chairman of Hyatt Hotels over what he called terrible judgment in maintaining contact with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein and his associate Ghislaine Maxwell. In a letter to the board, the 75-year-old said he would not seek re-election this year. He said in his statement, good stewardship also means protecting Hyatt, particularly in the context of my association with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, which I deeply regret. I exercised terrible judgment in maintaining contact with them, and there is no excuse for failing to distance myself sooner. Pritzker has held the role since 2004 and highlighted Hyatt's growth under his leadership. Steps taken during his time include taking the company public, shifting to a so-called asset-light strategy, and navigating the COVID-19 pandemic. His announcement comes after the U.S. Justice Department released millions of internal documents tied to Epstein. Epstein was arrested in 2019 on federal charges of sex trafficking of minors, and later that year died in a Manhattan jail cell, with his death ruled a suicide.
This week, the Pacific Coast is facing multiple storm systems, bringing heavy rain and potential flooding. Winter weather alerts were already in effect yesterday across parts of California, Nevada, and Oregon, ahead of 2 anticipated storm systems.
One of the things that we're concerned about with this storm is winds. Winds have been expected with gusts up to 60 miles per hour.
Authorities in Southern California reacting to the first of a series of storms threatening the Pacific Coast this week.
Heavy equipment operators. We've set up a swiftwater rescue team that's ready to respond, aviation resources.
The National Weather Service extended a flash flood warning Monday for parts of LA County amid reports of flash flooding and rock slides, with heavy rain forcing road closures due to mud and debris slides. Of particular concern, the possibility of debris flow on the burn scars from last year's massive wildfires.
This is all new mud, and some of the debris, you could see some of the burnt pieces of wood from the fire.
In Northern California and the Central Coast, the severe weather resulted in flooding and road closures and prompted rescues.
Felton firefighters actually went around and were able to hike and get to those two people to make sure that they were okay.
The storm also causing downed trees and power outages. Meanwhile, in the Sierras, there was heavy snow. And while it made roads hazardous, it was also a welcome sight for some, including skiers. The winter storm also pushing into Nevada, with slick conditions snarling traffic on parts of Interstate 80 at the California-Nevada border.
I knew there was going to be snow today, and I should have left yesterday instead of today, but oh well, I'm stuck here now. I can't even drive.
Coming up, Belgium summons the U.S. ambassador after he accuses the country of anti-Semitism over a judicial investigation involving circumcision. And the EU launches a formal investigation into Shein over illegal products and addictive design. Violations could bring fines of up to 6% of global revenue. I'm Stephanie Cox, and this is World Watch. Belgium has summoned the U.S. ambassador after he accused the country of anti-Semitic prosecution. The dispute centers on an investigation into Antwerp into whether 3 men performed circumcisions without certified medical training. U.S. Ambassador Bill White called the probe unacceptable harassment of Belgium's Jewish community. He urged legal protections for religious officiants. Belgian Foreign Minister Maxime Prévost rejected the accusation. He called it false, offensive, and dangerous disinformation. He said Belgium firmly condemns anti-Semitism, adding that ritual circumcision is permitted under the law when performed by qualified physicians. Prévost also said ambassadors must respect Belgium's institutions and judicial independence. And the European Union has opened a formal investigation into Chinese online retailer Shein. The probe falls under the bloc's Digital Services Act. Companies found in breach of the act could face fines of up to 6% of global annual turnover.
Today, the Commission is launching a formal investigation into Shein under the Digital Services Act. We suspect that the company has breached the DSA in 3 areas. First one, a highly addictive design for our consumers in the EU with rewards programs and a gamification of the service. Second, a lack of transparency on recommender systems. Third, the sale of illegal products online. What are these illegal products? This includes weapons, and this includes child sexual abuse material such as childlike sex dolls.
Shein may be required to alter its actions or pay a hefty fine if so-called non-compliance decision is reached following an in-depth investigation. The fast fashion giant came under fire last year in France, where authorities found illegal weapons, including firearms, knives, and machetes, as well as childlike obscene dolls for sale on its website. Shein and its Chinese rival Temu have become the most high-profile symbols of broader concerns over the flow of cheap Chinese products into Europe. Meanwhile, President Trump says he will soon decide on a major arms sale to Taiwan following discussions with Chinese Communist leader Xi Jinping. Trump yesterday said he spoke with Xi about the sale and their relationship remains strong despite differences. He also expects to visit China in April for talks with Xi. She has repeatedly warned that Taiwan is the most sensitive issue in U.S.-China relations. Washington approved a more than $11 billion weapons package for Taiwan last December, the largest ever proposed for the island. Days later, Beijing conducted massive live-fire drills near Taiwan. In Italy's central Naples, a historic 19th century theater ravaged by fire today. Officials say the interior of the theater was left in smoldering ruins. The roof was completely destroyed. The fire broke out at dawn. 2 firefighters were slightly injured when part of the roof collapsed. The theater first opened in 1847. It remains a popular venue for Neapolitan comedies and other performances. The cause of the fire is still under investigation. Moving to the UK, Britain wants to keep children safe online, but without compliance from tech companies, there could be wider restrictions on social media. The government is considering a ban for children under 16 years old. NTD's David Lamb reports.
Britain could be the next country to ban social media on a wide scale as early as this year if certain online risks are not reduced. The UK government says unchecked dangers such as addictive design and harmful content is pressuring it to prevent children under 16 from using social media. The government also plans to close a loophole on AI chatbots as part of its efforts to quickly address digital risks. After Australia became the first country to block access for people under 16 years old, Spain, Greece, and Slovenia said they are working on bans as well. Britain's 2023 Online Safety Act has a strict safety policy, but it doesn't cover one-on-one interactions with AI chatbots unless they share information with other users. The government wants to close this loophole as some children are forming relationships with AI systems. The government is also considering rules on how the data of social media users is stored.
We're taking immediate action that in the terrible event of a child's death, that there must be automatic notification of what we call data preservation notices.
In an interview with Times Radio Breakfast, UK Secretary Liz Kendall said that preserving online data could be vital to provide information to grieving families as well as evidence to investigators. In 2022, Ellen Room's 14-year-old son Jules passed away. She believes he was trying an internet challenge that went wrong. She hasn't been able to access his online data to prove it. An analysis from the UK-based Centre for Social Justice found that almost 1 million preschool children are active on social media platforms designed for teens and adults, even with age restrictions set at 13. Kendall says tech firms would be responsible for ensuring that their systems comply with British law. David Lamb, NTD News.
Coming up, an unexpected patient at a hospital in Germany, an injured Cormorant pecking at the emergency room door. When no one noticed, the determined bird tried a second entrance. The surprising moment caught on camera. Plus, countries across the globe, from Taiwan to Argentina, celebrating Chinese New Year as they welcome in the Year of the Horse. Welcome back. Mom power is on display at the Winter Olympics. A pair of American mothers won gold and bronze medals yesterday in the Monobob sled.
Yeah, my kids have sacrificed so much. Like, there's so many people who helped me win this gold medal. Like, it's incredible. I've had different nannies throughout the years, and they, each and every single one of them, did the work to help my kids get here, and it's just been so incredible. My husband, I can't even put it into words, like, what this means and how many people it really took to win this.
I mean, you get a lot of people that like to write you off. You know, as soon as you reach 40, it's all downhill from there is what you hear, you know. And I think Alana and I are both proof that that's not true. As soon as you become a mom, you know, your body's not the same and you can never get that high performance back. And I think we were able to show that that's not true again.
Gold medal winner Alana Myers-Taylor has 2 children with Down syndrome and hearing impairment. She won 3 silver and 2 bronze medals in her previous 4 Olympic appearances. That matches her with speed skater Bonnie Blair with 6 Winter Olympic medals as the most decorated U.S. woman. She becomes the oldest athlete to win individual gold at the Winter Games. She shared the podium with a fellow mom and a bronze medalist who gave birth to her son about 18 months ago. And countries all over the world are celebrating the Chinese New Year today, welcoming in the Year of the Horse. People from Taiwan to Buenos Aires gathered to celebrate and usher in another year of prosperity and good fortune.
Every year of the horse is special, or rather, the years of the horse make us think of a special year. The horse arrives and brings success, and believe it or not, we have been working with that energy for a month for this event.
I hope that my job will be smooth in the coming year and that I find a new job that I like.
In Taipei, the historic Bao'an Temple was struck 108 times to ring in the new year. That number is seen as an auspicious number in Chinese culture. And in Buenos Aires, the local Chinatown there kicked off a multi-day celebration with cultural and artistic activities, as well as a wide range of delicious foods. Argentina's Chinese community developed in two main waves, first by Taiwanese families who settled in the 1970s, followed by immigrants from China's Fujian province in the 90s. The new lunar cycle is associated with the fire horse, the seventh sign of the Chinese zodiac. Chinese zodiac signs are determined by year of birth, and they repeat every 12 years. So, next, staff at a hospital in Germany received an unexpected visitor when an injured cormorant appeared to try and seek medical attention by pecking on the glass door of the emergency room. According to the staff, the bird even went to the second entrance of the hospital when it was not immediately noticed. The nurse on duty, who was among those finally noticing the bird had been injured by a fishing hook stuck in its lower beak. She and her colleagues called the fire brigade, who often deal with incidents involving wild animals. She said the bird allowed the firefighters to calmly catch and hold it.
So, the bird had a fish hook stuck in his lower jaw. It was one of those treble hooks that are difficult to remove. We couldn't get it out with our instruments. The fire brigade then fetched a bolt cutter to cut off these small edges. My colleague then used our instrument to somehow lever it out of the jaw, and so it could be completely removed. We were able to open the bird's beak, and it cooperated nicely. We could look into its mouth, and nothing was injured.
This cormorant clearly had a fishing line wrapped around its beak, which may have prevented it from feeding and caused it considerable distress. We then cautiously approached the bird, which appeared to be very trusting and seemed aware of the problem it was facing.
And the fire brigade later released the bird into the wilderness. Some great teamwork there. Well, that's all we have time for now. But if you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Stephanie Cox. Thanks.